Hey guys, welcome back to the Lit Mag Lab podcast. I'm Vevna Foroya. So previously, I was showing you a couple different ways or locations, I should say, in terms of finding free submission opportunities. Right? Zero reading fees, zero processing fees. Right? How to filter for those, and yeah. So listen back to that podcast. If you're looking for more places to submit to that are fee free. Right? Because I think that's what a lot of writers and artists look for. Obviously, right? And yeah, so again, this podcast, I'm just a reminder, is for both, aspiring, editors or those who want to start their own lit mag and journal. And it's also for, submitters, right? Or writers and artists looking for homes for their work and just covering writing tips and thoughts and knowledge exchange, right? I don't know everything, obviously, right? No one does. So this is just like, sharing, right? Things I come across, things I want to talk about in the lit mag world, and also about presses and existence too, as well. We'll say that, yeah. So, as you can see today, we are going to cover another submission management system. Now, it is one I didn't really look for myself. Rather, I got a follow on one of my social media accounts. I was like, oh, what's Dapple? And that's Dapple, right? Dapple. So, yeah, I was like, oh, this is another submission management system. So I went to check it out, and I was like, oh, this is pretty neat. Yeah. So I thought I would just share it today, and yeah, just a heads up in advance. So, most of you aware who have, again, listened to the series, I mentioned a couple of times, right? I started Dippy Lit Mag back in 2022, right? And the first ever type of intake system we had was just a Google form, right? I set up a Google form, and then that's how, I collected submissions for issue one, right? And then I eventually moved over to Oleada, right? And then I moved to Submittable when I got on the CLMP membership. Again, a benefit of the CLMP membership is that you get a discounted rate off of Submittable, right? A monthly plan. And then on top of that, again, you're also paying your annual CLMP membership, right? And yeah, so the amount you pay for your CLMP membership also depends on, your annual budget and the size of your, Lit Magnet Journal, right? Typically, that's what I recall. And yeah, anyways, I just mentioned a few episodes back. I think it was episode 36 and 48, right? Subfolio. So you may recall, Dippy Lit Mag moved off of Submittable to Subfolio, right? So we've been on Subfolio for about, since July 4th, since we, opened submissions again, right? And I would say our migration process, it was what I had to do setup wise, it wasn't too bad, honestly. I just had again to block out some time to do that, right? It took a couple weeks. I set aside some time, a little bit each week. And we would have moved, right, the same, month I finished everything, right? But we had to wait until our last window, submissions from our last window were gone through and, looked over by a reading team, and yeah, anyways, so let's get started and dive into Dapple, right? And yeah, so I want to just mention again, I personally, I'm going to tack this on before we get started here. Sorry. I want to mention that, I'm not really looking for a new submission man system at this time because, we just moved, right? I literally, just said, right, a couple episodes back and earlier in this podcast around episode 15, right, alternatives to Submittable that, moving, right, to a new submission man system, right, getting off of Submittable. I had, again, some pain points with Submittable, things I didn't really like, so you can listen back to those episodes particularly, and I might mention some things again in this episode. But in any case, I'm going to cover Dapple and share with you guys because it may, if you come across it, it may be a solution for you. If you're thinking about starting a lit mag journal or press, just because what I choose or select doesn't necessarily mean it's what you'll like, right? Everyone has their preferences in terms of platforms and features and things like that, right? So yeah, so you can see here, it says Dapple is launching soon, right? It says you can create an account today to join their beta program and get exclusive access to all features. Now, again, I'm not going to create an account or anything like that. My reason being, again, I'm on a new submission management system, Subfolio, and I'm situated on it. I'm not looking to move off it or anything like that. Personally, I feel that Subfolio is pretty close to Submittable. That's how I feel. Yeah. But I think just by looking at Dapple, what I've seen, I'm going to scroll down and then I'll tell you a little bit more about it. But So, it has a very modern and clean look and design, no doubt, right? That you can tell that, right? And yeah, so let's go down and cover the basics, right? A little bit more information for you guys. So they have a press kit here, and yeah, so I'm just going to quote this off their site, right? So, Dapple is a workflow platform built for creative submissions. Whether you're running a literary magazine, managing open calls, or curating creative projects, it makes submission management effortless. Built by a team with experience in both software and the creative industry, it gives creators and editorial teams a clean, purpose built space to manage submissions, collaborate, and keep things moving. No spreadsheets, no chaos, just a simple, effective way to manage submissions. So yeah, it looks like they're based out of London, and the founders are, I'm gonna mess up names. I apologize in advance. Alice Adair and Oz, right? So I'm gonna mess up last names, so I apologize. But anyways, yeah. So I like places and platforms and systems, right? That really, again, I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, maybe in the last episode, that strive to help lit mags and journals, right? And those who run, the operations behind it, right? We really want to use systems and platforms that are, looking to make our lives easier, right? We don't want more stress when we use a platform or system by any means, right? So I would say, just I'm gonna do a comb over of some of the pricing plans and features, and just talk a little bit about maybe question marks I have and things like that. Obviously, I could book a demo, I could create a free account and do a trial with them, but I personally am not at a point where I'm looking to move at this time, just because of how recent of a migration I just did with Subfolio. So we've only been on it for less than 2 months, right? It's coming on our second month here. So yeah, so that may not be case for someone listening to this or coming across this episode. So yeah, so I'm just going to cover their plans here. So they have, it looks like, it says again, try us out for free, no credit card required. Once you exceed the free submission limits, they'll let you know and you can upgrade to a paid plan. Now, this is where it says, I'm quoting this off their site. If you are a CLMP member, right, the community of literary magazines and presses, you can apply for their special CLMP plan, right? If you don't know what the CLMP membership is, or you're curious what that is, about, right? I covered that in episode 16. So you can listen back to that. I don't know if I'll do a screen share on CLMP. I showed in the past episode their call submission section, right? That's with being logged out, right? So they have, member access resources and a lot more, once you become a member, in your lit mag or press, right? And you have to meet their requirements to join, right? And stuff like that. They have it all listed on their site. But yeah, let's click on the special CLMP plan and see what that entails. So I think I have to click on find out more, right? So it says here, you get basically flexible free submission limits and unlimited paid submissions. You receive 500 free submissions a month on the starter plan, 1,000 free submissions a month on the growth plan. It says they're flexible on limits too. So if you go over your max, you have the option to roll over into the following month's allowance. Perfect for quarterly issues or contests. So it looks like they have a rollover option here. And yeah, so I think that's nice, right? That we see that, you get a CLMP membership discount. Now, let's take a look at, the plans. I'm going to scroll back up here. So, I'm going to assume most places choose monthly plans. Maybe some like annual plans are paying all of an annual fee, or but I like monthly plans. So it looks like they have it's 34p, right? I'm not sure what the conversion rate on that would be. I'm sorry, guys. You can look that up. But, so showing 34p. They're based in London again, so you'd have to convert this. And 119p, right? 119 a month for the growth plan. So starters 34. Again, growth is 119 a month p, yeah. So it says the starter plan is perfect for solo or small businesses looking to accept a limited number of submissions. It says up to 250 submissions per month, up to 25 users, 5 teams, up to 10 projects, unlimited form fields, custom form branding, audit logs, 30 days, takes payments, right? So I don't know what they mean by audit logs. I mean, I don't know if that's like a summary of activity and everything happening log wise, or I think it would be nice to know about like archival, like how long did things stay archived, right? Because I know a lot of lit mags and journals, for example, Submittable have an extensive history, like let's say 5, 6, 7 years, right? They oftentimes like to archive submissions and acceptances because in the event they want to do put those in print or in a series one day or even an anthology or something, right? They can go back to their archive, look up the contact information for poet for nomination events and things like that, or for a series they put it in print, right? Yeah, so a lot of lit mags and journals, I think, again, that have, been on Submittable for quite some time, or even another submission management system, right? The longer I mentioned this on the podcast, the longer you stay with a submission management system, the harder it is to really leave. I feel like a lot of people or editors, right, get situated in a submission management system, and then they feel like it's really going to be a lot of work, right, to move and migrate. That's what they're really worried about, and to really have the features that they need, right, to feel comfortable with that. So, yeah, that's their starter plan I just read. And they have a step up from that, the growth plan. So it says here up to 500 submissions per month, unlimited users, unlimited teams, unlimited projects, rule based permissions, dedicated account managers, so someone to work with one on one, audit logs, it shows 90 days. I'm not really sure what that entails, audit logs. So, that's a question mark for me. And then beneath that, right, both on the starter and growth plans, it says unlimited paid submissions at 2.5% and 49 it looks like P there, and yeah. And then it's same thing on growth, right? So, yeah, they do have a free plan. I didn't really start with that first because I don't really think anyone in the LitMag community or world really use that. It's pretty limited, right? Their free plan has up to just 10 submissions per month, up to 10 users, one team, up to 5 projects. So, yeah, it does include Ash AI, and what is Ash AI, you're wondering, right? It says create form submission validation. And I think, the other plans as well include that too, right? Everything that free has, everything in starter, right? Includes that. Um, so if we go here, we're going to go out to their FAQ page, right? So, I read a little bit about Ash AI in advance, and, it's basically, an AI assistant tool, right? Now, I know a lot of writers, poets, artists, even, editors of lit magazine journals, they're like, no AI, right? They don't want to touch AI. They are, against it, right? And I mentioned on this podcast, right? I'm not saying AI is like the worst thing in the world or anything like that. No. I think, in some use cases, AI has minimized, as Dapple mentioned, right? Manual effort, manual, tasks, right? It has cut those down and streamline things. And yeah, so it says here that Ash AI, that assistant tool that they have, is turned off by default for all users, right? It says, you have full control on whether to activate it and use the features and to use their AI capabilities. So yeah, you can opt out of enabling it. And yeah, it says, even if you choose not to enable it, it says none of your submissions or data will be processed, and they don't use submissions to train AI models at all, or their AI model, right? Ash AI, they don't use that data. So yeah, I think that's good that they clarified that and they're not forcing it, upon anyone to use their, AI assistant tool, Ash, and yeah, so Submittable, right? I think Submittable does have an AI assistant tool. I've never used it, with our basic plan and stuff like that. I did, on Submittable, for example, manual form creation and all of that, right? And same thing with Subfolio, right? I did, I would say, for setting it up, I had to manually set things up a little bit, but some things, I would say there are cool things where some systems are able to, and I've seen this, right, are able to import categories you have open, easily, and things like that. But form side, you really have to, a bit, manually configure that yourself, and make sure you have everything you need and compare to what you had in the past before you migrate, right? Now with Ash AI, right? So if you use, right, if you're someone who is not against AI or perhaps likes AI tools or wants to save time with form creation, right? I think it may certainly do that. I haven't used it myself, so I can't say whether it's, give any really rating or thoughts on this at all. But I think, again, obviously, it shaves down time, right? They're stating basically you enter a description of the form you're looking to create. It makes that form for you. Now, keep in mind, AI is not perfect, right? AI makes mistakes. So there might be times where you still have to go in and manually do things, right? And configure your setup the way you want to. But still, AI cuts back on that time, typically, for some things. I would say let's go back here. And they have, their payment options here. They use Stripe as well, the integration. So let's go back to here. Yeah. So up here, right, you can see actually how it says automate your submission process, auto label, auto score, save time and effort, create forms of description. So I would say I don't believe a lot of lit mag journals and editors would use auto scoring. We like to manually score things, right? So I'm gonna assume most would, disable Ash AI, if it's going to automatically score things without, the option to it looks like you can change the score in here, right? So I think it allows for manual input still. So I wouldn't be one to personally to use anything that's auto scoring or things like that. I'm someone who likes to manually label things and score. Right, a lot of others I think do, but I think it could help. Per se, if they're referring to in terms of auto labeling, like a certain let's say there's an acceptance, right? And you want to label which categories it's in, the type of submission it is, or do a little bit more labeling, right? I don't think it's really necessary to label, right, declined submissions or, or things like that. But acceptances, archiving those, you typically want to label those and keep track of, active things or things you might, submissions you might want to publish later on in a series or elsewhere, right? So you can see a preview here, right, in on my screen, right? So this is an example to have short story submissions, and you can see there's a pen name field, the title of the piece, the word count, genre, and you can add your file, right? And it says here they have like tags here, right? And yeah, they have, a signee field here, for, team members of the Lit Mag Journal, submission tags, the scoring field I mentioned. It says 80 out of 100, but I think, a lot of places use 1 through 10 or even thumbs up and thumbs down. I don't know if they have just scoring or if they have other options for scoring in there. Because I know some are used to thumbs up, thumbs down too, like yes or no, to move forward in advance. Yeah, so there are stages. I think something, I have a brief summary I typed out too in my notes. I was going back and updating, I made a list of submission man systems in existence to check out, and then I gave a rating on ones I've used or I'm very familiar with in the community or I've heard good things about. The ones I haven't used myself or haven't really touched a bunch or anything like that, obviously I don't rate those, and I put limited knowledge and just share, about it, read about them, talk a little about some of the features, question marks I may have, if I haven't used it yet and things like that. So yeah, I think they have single sign on, too. So they have Google and then Microsoft sign on, and that's nice. Submittal had single sign on for Facebook and Google. Subfolio has just single sign on at the moment for submitter accounts. They don't have it for like organizational accounts, not on both sides, right? Just for the submitters, right? So I don't know if that's going to change, but anyways, single sign-on is awesome. I think it's very beneficial. I know a lot of writers, right, like that too. So not just organizations, right? And so I think Dapple, the platform essentially looks like again very modern, sleek, design wise, and they have this tutorial video. They also have it on their YouTube channel as well. So I think, it has several different use cases, like most submission management systems, right? You can use it for grants and things like that. It looks like you can change the theme here, right? So I think it has a, customized design. And this is an example of Ash AI, right? It says, it can generate a form based on your description, right? And yeah, so I think that is unique, right? It makes Dapple stand out from other submission management systems. Submittable does have an AI assistant tool for forms, if I recall, and some other things. I've never used it myself, so I'm not really aware of that. But you can see the tags here and stuff like that. I'm not going to cover every single thing about Dapple, right? It would go into an hour long, obviously, if I did that. But I haven't used it myself too, so that'd be even longer of a coverage of it. But yeah. And I apologize, I may be losing my voice on this episode a little bit. So, I think what Dapple has, is a great custom, analytical reporting. I think that's really important as lit magazine journals and editors. Something we have to calculate or keep on top of is our acceptance rate. So we enter that in, some of us, right, on chill subs, and then there's that also the tracker stats that others, may help be calculated on chill subs, right, by submitter tracking on chill subs tracker, right. But I think it helps us to really see, detailed reports and to see what's happening submission wise and tracking that, with each call. So yeah, I love places that say it's customizable. You can customize things. It has flexibility, right? I felt submittable was oftentimes, for example, too rigid, to things we couldn't really do with it because, oftentimes it says, oh, you have to upgrade if you want this feature, you have to upgrade if you want that, right. And a lot of times lit magazine journals can't go beyond their CMP plan, because they just don't have it budget wise and be way too expensive and costly, right. So yeah. um so they have scoring, right, and you can disable Ash AI again. You can do comments. I think they're the comments, the thing that I feel like that Smiddle doesn't have compared to, let's say, Subfolio and Dapple, right? I saw in a video, right, you can do commenting, right? I think in Submittable, the communication across readers and stuff isn't as smooth and stuff, there's like in Submittable internal notes, right, and things like that. And yeah, and then there's a message section for, submitters, right, where you message submitters, but internal notes and things like that. And yeah, I felt it wasn't also super easy to set up a workflow in Submittable personally. And if something's not really, clicking for you in a couple of minutes or not easy to set up, that's probably going to just make more work for you, eat up more time. You want something that you can grasp really quickly, right? Of course, things take time to learn, but, it shouldn't be, very so hard to the point where it's costing you several hours of your time, right? Or being very time consuming. So I feel like, that's the team collaboration aspects. I feel of Subfolio and Dapple, what I saw from commenting and conversational flows, I think that's really great. Subfolio, on the other hand, I feel like, has a great, chat integration, feature, that you can sort of, it's reminiscent again of like Slack or Discord, and mentions like on social media and stuff that we do like that. So yeah. um I think, workflow creation is really important though. So, I think I feel that Subfolio and what I've seen from Dapple, just looking and reading it over, it sounds, Dapple sounds like it has a pretty, customizable workflow options, and you can do drag and drop between stages. So that I think is really unique too. Um, so yeah, it says I think you get unlimited and customized stages, right? I think on the starter growth plan, and just keep in mind they do have an enterprise plan for larger organizations as well. And I just want to mention this is not a sponsored episode at all. Again, I just came across Dapple because they had followed me on social media. I was like, oh, this is pretty interesting. I might as well share it. So yeah, none of these are sponsored episodes. Just for your information. Um, yeah. So again, I would say if you're someone who likes AI, you could certainly try out Ash AI. It's going to save time with form creation and even other tasks. I think I saw somewhere where they mentioned that it also helps with like other automations and filtering and reviewing, right? So yeah, they have, again, ways for you to pay for send payments out, right, via Stripe, intake things, right, for additional services, right, Stripe payments. I know not everyone's a fan of Stripe, but honestly, the benefit of having Stripe, like with Subfolio and Dapple, right, they have both use Stripe, right, is that you get faster payouts, right, and and I think it's Stripe also has, I think, on the back end, we also use it for like our other system for our help desk. And there was like this feature I saw that I never, I'm just fairly new to Stripe myself. Substack even uses Stripe, right, a lot of places, for payments and stuff like that. But I saw like there was a way to, again, send a refund like in one click, right, off to someone, like, if they, sometimes we see poets, we've seen back when we had submission fees, right, we don't have submission fees anymore at Dippy Lit Mag, right, we discontinued that last month. But Sometimes poets would make mistakes, right, submitting or things like that, and or sometimes we wouldn't meet the fast track option. Like one time that happened, right, and I did a refund, right, for that. And to do that though, I had to go outside of submittable because we didn't have features built in to facilitate that, right. And I think that's nice that I think you don't Stripe has that on the back end where you can go in and send refunds back, so I think that's important to have. If you're ever using a system where you have to go outside of your inbox or email still, that's not really centralized hub, right? And I really felt that way with like Google Workspace back when I was starting my Lit Journal, and also Leada. I was still doing tasks outside via email. So, with Submittable, really wasn't doing that. There were cases where, we had things, there was a time we didn't hear back from a poet for like 4 months. And I ended up, retrieving their contact information and sending them an email outside. And it's just because it got lost in their inbox. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes, we send back decisions to every poet and stuff like that. But I've seen from time to time things get lost still, but less so when you're using a submission management system, right? Less so. It minimizes that likelihood, right? So you just want to make sure, again, things aren't in your spam or winding up in weird folders or rules you have, right, in your inbox, as a submitter, right? But anyways, you can see they have like a submission stages board, project filters, all of that. It's a very very clean and organized layout again, and yeah, so it looks pretty cool. Kanban board style. I think I haven't seen that for other submission management systems before, so I think that's very distinct and cool. So yeah, um, it says visualize your submissions on a board, and I would say I'm a very visual person. I like to see everything laid out. It's almost like I don't know if you guys ever use Trello. Trello is like it's Atlassian's right Kanban board, right? So drag and drop stuff too. I like drag and drop. I would say that is a nice feature. Yeah, so they have their full feature list, and again, of course, I could book a demo, I could do a trial of it, but I'm pretty again situated with the current submission man system I have, right? Subfolio. We just did a move, so I'm just going to share some of the features of Dapple, right? And yeah, take the time to do that. So it says automated notifications, right? Built-in payments. I mentioned Stripe. It says give an opportunity to charge customizable entry fees for each of your projects and make payments to you directly. Workflow management. It says automate repetitive administration tasks, stages, right? I mentioned that. Multi-organization team and users, so you can create multiple teams within each organization. It says set up in seconds, yeah. I don't know about seconds, but obviously, they're probably saying it takes less time than most submission management systems to set up, right? Yeah. I think your setup time really depends on how many projects you want, right? And to create your categories and buckets. And yeah, oh, something of projects. So let's go back really quick here to pricing, right? So it says again up to 10 projects here, so it's limited here, right, on the starter plan, and then on the growth plan you get unlimited projects. So with submittable, right, and projects, I believe it's going to be like the call or bucket, right, that you have. Yeah. So with submittable, right, the things I didn't like about it on our basic plan, even with the CLMP membership, right, we were limited and restricted to six buckets a month, and you could say products or category calls, right? So then we'd have to wait until we open up our next set of calls, right? And that is a waste of opportunity, right? I think. And then also we couldn't have as many team members as we wanted. We had I mentioned this in the submittable episode number 35, and or no, I do cover just the discover page, right, on episode 35 more so, and then episode 15 was where I mentioned that a little bit, what are how many team members we could have on our plan. And form fields, we had a restricted number of form fields we could have for each project or call or category on submittable, so that really sucked. So I think up to 10 products, I think that's nice. It's not too bad, but I think it'd be better if it was unlimited, right? And subfolio has unlimited, right? And I really like that. We don't have restrictions on the number of team members we can have. We can have as many calls as we'd like open. And yeah, we opened up, actually, I think you guys could see, right? 10 calls. We had 10 calls open, this just currently, right? And so we're not restricted anymore to just six, right? So that's great. Yeah, so how many projects you need, it really depends, I think, on the size of your organization and your schedule, right, for calls and stuff like that. Yeah, so I think most places would be okay with, up to 10, but everyone has a different, structure, so not necessarily. Um, anyways, yeah, so obviously, some lit magazine journals have, get several hundred submissions, right? So some, are seeing several, I mentioned on this podcast, right? Some get several thousand submissions a month. They have a huge amount of traffic. And then some lit magazine journals starting off, and I would say Dippity, Lit Mag and Dippity Press, right? We're fairly young still, just we're coming up on our third year anniversary here, right? 3 years, right? In September, around the corner here. So, yeah, we're still fairly new. We haven't been around for like 5, 10, 15 years or anything like that. So, we lost also, I would say, a lot of our submission traffic that we had seen through Submittable's Discover page. So that's why I have a lot of spare time and downtime now, guys, because it's very quiet. We're seeing submissions trickle in, obviously, but we don't have that same level of traffic that we had with Submittable. Obviously, because a lot of places and poets and writers check those, the submission Discover page, opportunities page I showed you on the past episode, right? And even in episode 35. Yeah. One thing I will say, it takes time, right, to build that back up. When you move to a different system, a lot of poets, writers, artists came across our calls through Submittable, right? So now others are finding us through word of mouth, through, our social media, right? Things like that. And yeah, so yeah, it'll take time to build that traffic up, and as more publications join, like let's say Safolio, right, it'll grow. But what I don't see from Dapple at this time is like a discover opportunities page, like I showed you on the past podcast episode. So Submittable has a discover opportunities page. Duo Suma has a discover page, and tied to Duotrope, right? That's their submission management system, Duo Suma. And then Safolio has a discover page. So I don't know if they have anything like that really, or have anything on their roadmap to do that. I think that would be beneficial to have that, because a lot of places do, right? As I showed you in the past episode, and it just helps centralize calls and others to find things for publishers, or lit magazine journals and presses using the platform, right, to show all the calls available at the time from organizations. So yeah, um, yeah, so I would say, the it's going to come down, which submission management system, you want to use, right? It's going to come down to the features you're really looking for, and also, the cost, right? But most importantly, you have to test drive these submission management systems, right, to really get a feel for them. So I'd recommend, checking out the list pros and cons I made. It doesn't, again, cover every single feature, of the submission management systems, right? I listed about 8 back in June, and now I've added Dapple, so 9. And that excludes, obviously, email and, intake forms on websites, right? Some of the, perhaps ways others intake submissions that are a bit messier and harder to manage. I feel like, with email and, intake forms on websites, and they're even like contact form caps with websites and, integrations and stuff like that. And then they make you pay, right, for more contact forms for that. And there are free form systems I showed, in that article too, or low cost ones that have caps on the amount of free submissions, right, to the form. But yeah, it's just, I feel like, obviously you can tag things in email and stuff, but the thing about email, right? Every email account has storage limits, right? A lot do, right? And then you end up paying for storage to keep an archive of some kind in, let's say, Google Drive or somewhere else, right? And that can be costly itself, right? So, yeah, I think submission management systems eliminate a lot of headaches. Of course, they are not free, right? If you want to sustain several hundred submissions a month or more, several thousands, right? And a lot of lit magazine journals, right? As I mentioned in the past episode, they implement submission fees because they use those fees, right, to cover operational costs. One of those being submission management systems, right? But again, I mentioned there are a lot of fee-free places to submit. So again, listen back to that episode to find them. Yeah, or to find places where you can locate those. I shared that on the last episode. So yeah, let's go back to their features, right? The feature outline. So it says make changes anytime, so you can customize things even when applications are open. Yeah. So that same thing applies to submittable. The only thing about that, if you change something when a call is open, right? It was submittable. What that did was it would say, oh, the other anyone who has a draft, it's going to kick them out, and then they have to submit again, right? And that's bound to happen. So yeah. The submission man systems I've used, I have most experience with, I would say is Submittable, Subfolio, and Oleada, right? And then I've used, intake forms before myself. I don't have a lot of experience with Duo Suma, I would say, but I've heard nothing again but good things about it. And there's the CLMP membership. They've increased the discount, by the way, is on it, guys, this year. So that's great. But yeah, Duo Suma has a lot of great features. I would say it's up there with Subfolio too. I know I have some friends in the community who use Duo Suma, so I just based my rating off of that, and my interactions with Duotrope, right, for everything, and our listings and stuff. So yeah, I think Dual Soma is one, that I think is particularly, I've heard again good things about, and particularly like, based on what I've read and the discount that they've, applied to, the CLMP membership. They made changes to that this year, which a lot liked. Um, yeah, so it says accept any media here, text, images, video, custom tags. And I saw you can, preview files like you do in Oleada, Submittable, Subfolio, right? You can, without downloading them. It says real-time progress, take payments, right? Again, save favorite submissions in one click, right? So it says create beautiful forms, right? So yeah, it looks like you can customize the background of the forms or customize it a bit further, and um, yeah, it says secure, right? So they mentioned the security, right? And yeah, and confidentiality. Now, role based permissions, I believe that is only on the growth plan, so the higher end plan. I think that the growth plan they have is definitely outside of the range I have budget wise for sure. So I would never be able to do that, myself personally. So I like with well, with Submittable, I feel like Submittable's flaw. I mentioned this on the podcast, right? Their current setup as of August 2025, or the not August 25, but the last time I used them, right before July, um, you know, before July 4th, right? So they had still a setup where you just had basically check boxes for permissions. You couldn't customize those. You couldn't, fine tune permissions. It was just like levels and check boxes, right? And I think that's a huge flaw, to do that, because there's some things you want to train others on and you don't want them to have permissions quite yet, right? And you can't really do that. With Subfolio, for instance, you can really drill down permissions and customize that, right? And really refine that. And so, yeah, it's nice that Dapple has that, role based permissions, I think. But, and you have an audit trails of actions, Submittable had that too, and things like that. Yeah. So it's important to have event tracking, and Subfolio has that too, events that happen on submissions. You want to keep tabs on all of that. So, yeah, it says there's a accept decline automations with one click and stuff. Yeah. I don't really see anything mentioned about templates, so I don't know if you can have, templates in here, or anything like that. That's what's not really apparent to me, but it mentions, one click accept decline, so I'm assuming, there's maybe capabilities there to do that. So, yeah. What else do we have here, guys? Let's look. Reporting analytics. Um, yeah, it says comments from other users available to you in one place. So yeah, it says again, payments powered by Stripe, highly scalable, authentication, right? Yeah, and keep track of changes made by made to submissions by users, right, as well. And again, single sign-on, which I covered, right? So yeah, so I didn't read every single thing off, right? But it says real-time comments, right? Discuss submissions in real time by team members by tagging them submission. So yeah, it looks like they do have some sort of tagging functionality for conversations and discussing submissions. So that's nice, similar to, I would say, Subfolio in a sense, right? I think that's what Submittable lacks. It doesn't feel as, very smooth like conversational style in Submittable. It's like, you have your internal notes, and then you have like this message section with submitters, and then, and a separate section there. I feel like I didn't really like the messaging setup of Submittable between, team members and putting notes and thoughts, right, on submissions. I didn't like that setup. So yeah, I would say I like that they mentioned that and that they have that. But yeah, so you really have to compare, and contrast these. You have to try them out, right? So, a lot of places have, free trial options, right, that you can do, right? Same thing with Subfolio, right? And yeah, it mentions here Dapple, right? You can try it out, right? And see if you like it. And you can schedule a demo, meet with their team, and see. You really have to, again, test drive it to really, get to see if it's what you're looking for. Now, it has, again, I mentioned, it seems like a very clean design and everything like that. The main thing, a lot of founding editors, lit magazine journals, want, right? They want something that's functional, that, meets their needs, right? And that is, within their budget. Absolutely, right? So, that's so important. And I think also support is a huge aspect of, needing that support, right? Efficient support to respond to things that happen with submission management systems, right? They're not perfect, right? Just Submittable, right? An example, right? We had this instant where a rejection letter was sent out to just one person like 6 7 times, and we only clicked the button once, right? And it happened to other lit magazine journals, and there were so submission management systems occasionally need maintenance, right? Upkeep updates, right? And I'm sure over time, Dapple is just getting started here. Also, Subfolio launched this year, so I think we'll see, over the next couple years, or submission management systems evolve and change, right? Their UIs and looks. They add features, right? Submittable started back in, think, 2010, right? So I don't know what they looked like beforehand. There's probably images out there of what Submittable used to look like when it started, but it's probably night and day. And I think we'll see that with submission management systems, like Subfolio even, or, Dapple may add features one day or things like that too. Same with Subfolio, right? So definitely we'll see more growth from these submission management systems, I feel, right? So yeah, I think in terms of like the free plan that or the lowest plan that Dapple has, I don't really see any lit mag or journal really using that. It seems more like of just a trial, plan and stuff to get a feel for their features and stuff. I feel like Subfolio has a better, small plan, right? You have not just 10, free submissions, but you have, 100 free submissions, and it's $10 per month, right? USD. So yeah, and you still get, the features and stuff, and then, it is 65 cents, with Subfolio, and 3.9%. But honestly, it's not too bad still, right? And we're on, Subfolio, right? Our bill, migrating from Submittable to Subfolio, right? Our bill didn't change at all, right? We're still paying, $29 a month, right? And I think that's great. And we get to, have, unlimited free submissions, unlimited team member seats, unlimited categories. And, so nothing really changed there. And we can set up tip jars, donation jars, right? We have automation capabilities, right? And yeah, and the chat and the, conversations we can have in terms of assignments and polls. I really like the poll feature too that Folio has. So yeah, I think tagging is great that Dapple has that and Subfolio. I think that's really neat. It makes us feel like we're, still, when a lot of places I know also use Slack and Discord and stuff like that. And I think it's better when you can really centralize, again, communication on submissions in one place. But still, sometimes we have other systems where we communicate on availability and stuff like that, right, from time to time. But predominantly, it's important that we communicate about submissions, in one place. So I think that conversational features, right, like commenting, tagging, those are really beneficial because it makes you feel like you're using those platforms you're used to, right? Like Discord, Slack. What else? What else is out there? One of the first ever ones I used, aside from those two, was HipChat, right? HipChat was what Atlassian used to have. I don't think that still exists, right? HipChat. Does it, guys? I wonder. But anyways, I'd use that, at my one of my the second workplace I ever had, right? And yeah, so it makes it feel like that, like hip chat almost. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, HIPCHT, look it up. Look up screenshots of hip chat. But it feels like that, right? So, I think communication and use of that, on submissions is really important. And I was mentioning support earlier, so Dapple, Safoli, right? They're just starting out, so obviously, as a submission management system grows over time, of course they'll get right support teams, maybe like Submittable has, right? Submittable has a whole help desk system, right, and others who provide support to Submittable, right? And things like that. So, eventually, I'm sure Subfolio support team will grow, Dapple support team will grow, like, what we see with Duosuma and Duotrope, right? And yeah. So I would say, my favorite submission management systems, again, just a summary, you can find this out on the article I typed on my Substack too, just a general coverage, right? But I would say my top three would have to be, the ones I've used anyways in order would be Subfolio, and then I'm familiar, not necessarily ones I use, but ones I would say, are up there in terms of like which ones I think are probably going to be, great in terms of cost and reasonable cost, right, and within budget ranges. So I would say Subfolio, Duosuma, and then you know I like Submittable too, but I would say, I haven't tried Dapple at all, but I would say it's up there, maybe in the top five, submission management systems out there just by looking at what they have, And no, I know I haven't tried it, and you have to try it to see if you like it or not. But yeah, Moksha I feel like was always too expensive, it's outside of my range. But yeah, it's nice that Dapple has like a lower end plan, middle plan in their starter, and I think Moksha was always like way too expensive, right? And that was the one I almost went with aside from Submittable, right? So you have to see whether which one's going to work for you. You have to try these out, do trials with them. If you're a founding editor or thinking about starting a lit mag or journal, you have to see what really is going to work for you. But I showed in my ratings, right? Subfolio was number one, and I said Duo Suma and Submittable, had higher ratings, and Dapple. I haven't used Dapple, but based off of the features they have and stuff, I think it's a it's a contender for sure. In the lit mag world and space community. I know AI is being implemented in a lot of places nowadays. It's something that's not going away. So I think if you're someone who has, feels that, if you're someone who's familiar with form creation and submission management systems, and you like things that are, quick to set up and, with limited, minimal manual effort, right? Something like they have Ash AI, right? That may be beneficial to you. I personally don't mind some manual tasks, and setting up and making sure everything's, done right. Now, with AI tools, some you still have to refine things that are created with them, right? They're not like flawless or they're not perfect 100% of the time, I feel like, right? So I've experimented with things, guys, myself, like with Base 44 and Super Base, just for fun, some of those app creation tools, like AI tools, right? But I would say I love, traditional art, traditional writing, and photography, and all of that, right? So a lot of lit mags and journals, right, are, anti AI in terms of like poetry, they no AI poetry, no AI writing. There are places out there in the lit mag world and drone that say, if you've used AI for your piece that you're submitting to us, please be upfront with us. The thing about AI, right? It's in terms of the writing world and stuff, it's like Instagram, for example, right? They don't let you opt out currently of AI training, right? Which I think is a huge problem because a lot of artists were upset when that happened. And then you have like other apps coming out, like what was that called, guys? And sorry, I'm going off topic here a little bit, but Kara, right? The Kara app, right? So going on apps like that. and feeling pretty messed up about it. But a lot of users, of like social media, Instagram and other places, right, they are situated on it. It's their primary way of sharing their work and stuff. So they're like, it's hard. It's really hard when AI is being used to, your content's being used to train a system. So it's nice that Dapple says, you can opt out, and we don't use your data to train the system. We're not doing that. It's just an assistant tool to help you. So yeah, again, I haven't used it myself, so I'm not going to say, it's, I can't give a rating on it. I can't say if it works well or not. I'm just sharing, that it exists, right? I'm sharing its existence, so you're aware of Dapple. So you have a lot of options as a, if you're going to start a lit mag or journal, or looking to migrate off of your current submission management setup. Something I want to point out real quick. So let's go over to down on their site here, and I'm going to scroll all the way down, and you can export reports too. I didn't really cover that a whole bunch, but let's go to their blog. So I thought this was interesting because I just literally talked about this on the last episode, right? But this was posted by Oz, it looks like, on July 15th, right? So it says submission fees in the literary publishing, finding the right balance. So they basically have, I think this is nice that they have blog articles on some of the topics that come up in the literary magazine, lit mag world, and among presses too. So it says, should literary agents charge reading fees? And it says in a word, no. And yeah, so it says here now, I'm not sure where they calculated this data from exactly. They mentioned duotrope, but it says they mentioned 45%. I'm quoting this right from Oz's article. 45% of literary magazines charge submission fees, average range about $2 to $10. And yeah, I've seen personally $3 to $5 for the places I've mostly checked out. But I feel like some submission fees have gone way up for sure in the last year or so. And yeah, and again, I mentioned there are tons of fee free opportunities, out there. You can listen back and watch that last episode on, the various platforms or databases you can search and directories to find those opportunities, for fee free submissions. Poets and writers, I also mentioned that episode, right? They have a no fee option, a filter, I mean. And yeah, so I think this is a nice blog article that they actually covered this, and I said some of this stuff in my podcast too, so I'm not going to go through it again. But reasons for submission fees, right? They go into it a little bit, right? And something I didn't really mention on this podcast a little bit, when something some editors have seen when implementing a submission fee, right? It's they often find that submitters or writers and artists take a little bit more time with their submission to read the guidelines carefully because they don't want to lose get a rejection over something small as not following the guidelines, right? That often costs others their chance of acceptance real quick, right? Not following guidelines. So oftentimes, it also, as they mention here, it reduces spammy submissions, right? Spammy behavior, right? And so that's what some have seen, right? And yeah, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, sometimes we still get some pretty unusual submissions. I've seen, back when we had a different fee structure, right? First time was free, and then second time we were not. We still saw poets not following guidelines and things like that from time to time. Back when we were on submittable, right? But now we have no reading fees whatsoever. So, we're not really, yeah. We do have additional feedback options at Dippy Lit Mag, and separate buckets for that. And yeah, so we've done, I've done, paid feedback options. I've offered like additional feedback, and since we have submissions being free now, right? We still, we're not at Dippity Press, right? We're not fee free there, but we have disabled writers fee waivers. Now, something I don't see with Dapple, I'll share, I know this is getting up to an hour now almost. I know I said, oh, I'll just do a summary episode, but I want to talk about this. So I don't see anything about fee waiver request in Dapple's submission system or anything like that, or, how anything mentioning that. So I like that, with, and Submittal didn't really have that either, oftentimes others had to, what we had to do in Submittal was put a checkbox for that. And like Subfolio has a really cool like a separate form for those that can keep track of that, right? Fee waiver request on certain categories. We can generate a essentially a fee waiver form linked off to them, right? And they request it, to us, upon request. But you can also totally set up a checkbox for that. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but yeah, I think it's fee waiver requests. A lot of places do have those, so I think it's it's important to keep track of those easily too. So I don't really see them mention that at all, but yeah, they cover, yeah, right. It states here, right? I mentioned this, right? Writers shouldn't have to pay to have their work considered, right? Fees exploit desperate writers. The model, right, may favor privileged voices, and yeah. So I like that they have these blog articles out here. I'm not going to read through all of it, but maybe I'll read some of their other blog articles. And I mentioned some of this on the podcast already, but I think that's nice. They have even an article here reading, 10 reasons to ditch the email inbox, right? Why, you're, let's click on this, right? So, right. It says, number one, maybe I'll just read the outline for you guys. And this was by Oz again back in July 28th. So it says, number one, enhance submitter experience, enforce guidelines, streamline file management, and they say AI powered review process. So they're saying Dapple is, it says it uses, I'm quoting this, Dapple's Ash uses AI to identify and flag submissions that may contain factual elements outside of the set guidelines. Time spent on reviewing a submission that may ultimately be the wrong genre, break a word count, or be far away from what you stated is time wasted. It helps you discover the right talent faster while reducing administrative overhead. So, yeah, it looks like with their Ash, assistant tool, they're really looking to cut down on, irrelevant submissions or ones that don't follow the guidelines. But I feel like, it's really up to you, if you're someone who's like for AI tools or not for AI tools, right? If you don't like them. I know some people are like, I'll never touch anything AI related ever in my life. And some people are like, yeah, AI helps now and then in some cases, in some situations and tasks, so yeah, I personally, again, have just toyed with some fun, app creation sites and platforms, I mean, and stuff just for fun to see what it's about. Even I think we've all done like those fun AI, profile creation things too. But I've always been like a traditional artist again myself and stuff. I like things from scratch and learning how things work on the back end and setting things up from scratch. That's just how I've always been. But you want to save time and cut down effort and stuff, or set up work, and you want to be when you're getting on a system, right, you want it to be smooth, right, smooth sailing. You want it to be fast, efficient, right? So I think some tools like Ash may do that if you're someone who likes things like that. It really is a preference thing, right? AI is still very controversial, in today, and it's always going to be, I guess. So it's really up to you, whether that's for you or not. Yeah, so it says centralized collaboration, automated workflows, team coordination, enhanced security, data driven insights, professional communication. Yes, so it does say here message templates and bulk message features, right? So they do have messaging templates. So yeah, and bulk message features, right? So yeah, I would say Dapple is definitely up there in terms of like features and capabilities compared to other submission management systems out there. Like Oli Ada has been out there for around for a while, but it has it's very limited, I would say, till today. But I know some places still use it. It's very, I don't remember, like I don't see any pricing or plans in there. I think we were using it on a free basis, and at some point in time they said once they grow it enough they were going to have $15 a month or something. I could be wrong. I don't know if Olieta is still, working on a roadmap or plan because it hasn't been, updated in a bit. It looks like from what they have on there. But in any case, the ones I've been following closely are definitely right. Submittable, right? We just got off of there. We migrated to Folio. I also follow Duosuma and Duotrope. I use Duotrope. I've hopped in there on the podcast a couple times to show you listings and calls, right, on Duotrope. And Duotrope has Duosuma, right? That's their submission management system. So look at those, right? Totally look at those. If you're someone who's, looking to get off of your email inbox or to stop using Google, Forms, right? This may be a way for you. One of these submission management systems may be an option for you. It's going to come down to cost and your submission volume, right? What you're looking for feature wise. And yeah, so you really have to take that in consideration. And I'm not saying Google intake forms aren't, great or easy to use at all. I just feel like it's perhaps not the easiest to work with in terms of team collaboration and juggling a bunch of submissions at a time. I know quite a few places still use Google Forms to help keep track of things. There's even Microsoft Forms, right? And intake forms on sites. But I'm someone who likes to have everything in one place to keep track of everything, tag, label, even color coding, some sort of color coding dots or tags and stuff. I think that's important. I like that. So, Submittable has that, Subfolio has that. It looks like Dapple also has taggings. You can see little dots and things there in their submission management system. So yeah, they're London based, and I didn't do conversion rates for you guys on the plans, but obviously you can go out and do that. But in any case, they do have, a CLMP membership discount, it looks like, and that's great. So I think, it's definitely an option for others out there, looking for alternatives to Submittable. I would say my favorite submission management system that I've tried thus far and used currently, right, would be Subfolio, though. I feel like it's very close to Submittable, what we were looking for. And it's really, it's really cool, I must say. And Dapple, and again, no doubt. I say no doubt a lot, guys. Sorry, but no doubt, Dapple is cool. I think they have a very unique structure, and Ash AI, right, is quite unique too. And some of the other customizable features, the design is very, again, it looks very modern and clean. And yeah, so I think that's really great. Yeah, and who knows, other submission management systems, sometimes they undergo, a coat of fresh paint or change their looks and designs a couple of times over the years too. So what we see today may not be what we see, in the next couple of years, right, with some of these submission management systems, right? So yeah, so look at Dapple, see if it's an option for you. Check out the list I have. Please be sure to check out, episode 35 of this podcast on Subfolio, episode 48, and also episode 35 on Submittable. Just I was showing you mostly an overview of what from the submitter's perspective, and yeah, and also, Duosuma. I showed you a little bit of like the Discover Opportunities pages there. I haven't done an episode solely on Duosuma or, Duotrope. I mention it in, episode 15, and then I also mention it elsewhere a little bit too. So yeah, thanks to technology, we have a lot of different submission management systems in existence, and there's a lot of flexibility with some of these systems nowadays, and I think that's really great that we're seeing that more and more. Options, right, to streamline things, to to speed up things, right? We want to, right, our time when we are, our time is very important to us, right? We don't want to spend time doing things that could be perhaps automated, right? Eliminating a lot of the manual tasks is important. But I think it's so important, again, to, as readers, as lit mag journals, right, to manually score things, to manually review things still very carefully, right? It's nice to have automated like assignments, automated functions here and there, but in terms of like carefully screening things to, meet the guidelines and things like that, I think it's important that we, double check those things, right? Because I'm just saying, like, AI tools are not to the point today still where they're 100% flawless 100% of the time, right? So there's room there for error, right? And no human being's perfect, no system's perfect. So you have to keep that in mind. That's all I'm saying from my perspective. In any case, Dapple looks very cool, so check it out. I've created a playlist out on YouTube of like submission managers I've covered. I don't know if I'll do an episode on every single one in existence or the ones I'm aware of or talk about them, but if this helped you, check it out and take care. Again, I've never used it before, and I don't know if I'll create a trial count and test it out further, but I don't think so at all at this time. I'm pretty much, rooted and situated, I mean, on Subfolio because I just did a migration, so I'm really not looking for a new submission management system. I would say I'm happy with the one I have right now. But we'll see. We'll see. As time goes on, we've just been on Subfolio for like 2 months, right? So we'll have to see. As time goes on. And yeah. You should know, as whether you be a lit mag journal press, right? You can always change your submission management system, right? I think it's just harder the longer you wait and you get situated on it, right? You have more things to move to migrate, right? So, considering we had our relaunch, we're doing our relaunch of Dippity Lit Mag, right? And I had a lot of pain points with submittable, and I wanted something easier for our reading team to use. I felt comfortable leaving submittable, and we were restructuring things anyways, so I was comfortable at the time leaving submittable and moving to Subfolio. So everyone's setup time, if you're going to migrate to a new system, is going to vary, right? It's not going to be the exact same time or the amount of time exactly. So yeah. Anyways, I know this was an hour-long episode, guys, so I'm going to stop talking, and I hope this helped you. Please do, I'll drop links to Dapple, and check it out. Again, I love what they're doing. I think they're really striving to make others' lives easier in terms of the submission management world, for lit mag journals and presses. Obviously, other organizations can use submission management systems for like grants and other things, right? Not just that. But in any case, I love what they're doing and striving to help others, right? I think that's important, right? Giving us less headaches in terms of submission management and organization and, yeah, so that's all. So just wanted to share it on this podcast because I had come across it when they followed me. I was like, oh, I got to share this. It looks pretty neat. So yeah, take care, guys, and bye. Yeah, so check out the list of submission management systems I put together again and just covered pros and cons. You really want to do trials of these. If you're going to start a lit mag or journal, or looking to switch off of your current setup or to try it out, you really have to test drive it. I'm going to say it again because it's really important. You really get an idea if you're going to like something or not, usually pretty early, right, when you start interacting with the features and stuff. So yeah, so ease of use is, sorry, I'm losing my words. Ease of use is so important, right? And again, pricing. So yeah, we all have different budgets, so you have to choose something that fits what your budget is and what you're looking for feature wise. What's most important to you, and take considering how many submissions you've been averaging a month, right? And yeah, so that's all. A lot of information in this episode, right? And I'll have to circle back to some of those articles. It looks like Oz wrote, and yeah, because they're things I've reiterated on this podcast earlier too. But I think it's nice that they do that, too. And I'm sure they'll add more KB articles and support pages too. Same thing with Subfolio, right? They're just starting out this year. So all that takes time, right? Launches and stuff. So I understand. And I'm sure they might add more features. Same thing with Subfolio over time as time goes on, and as more use their systems, right? Yeah. So bye guys, yeah. And one PS note, guys. So I really love Subfolio, I must say, so that's just me, that's just based on, interacting and trying it and using it, being on it for 2 months thus far. I think it's better than Submittable for sure. That's just my opinion. And yeah, so I love Subfolio, but, definitely some lit mags, presses, and journals out there may fall in love with Dapple, no doubt, right? It's packed with a lot of features too, a lot of great ones. Yeah, I think it may be concerning to maybe some, submitters, maybe, if they look into Dapple and they're like, oh, these guys are using AI to screen my submission, right? That means they're not really reading it or looking at it. They're having it auto review and scan my submissions. But no, I think what some lit mags and journals and presses might have to do is like, we don't, you know, use, AI to the platform we use for submission intaking system, right, is not um implementing AI training on your submission data. I think it's important that, lit mags and journals, right, that maybe use Dapple or are going to leverage it and maybe even Ash AI, make that known, right? Because I think that might be concerning to others, right? In regards to their submissions, their art, their work, right? They want to, oftentimes, right, artists are like, I want to opt out of like AI training and stuff. I don't like that stuff. So I think it's important to, make that transparent, right? That Dapple, for instance, is not, doing anything like that. It's not, training submissions, what they state on their site, and claim, right? They're saying it's not going to, right, train, it's not used for AI training, right? The data and everything is not, and it's optional to use Ash AI. I think, what I'm thinking of, why I'm mentioning this is because I think in, like, for instance, the job application world, right? When you're submitting to a job nowadays, right? Something that we see is like, do you want to opt in or opt out? Not on all applications, but I've seen this, right? Do you want to opt in to AI, screening your application, right? Because they give that option on some of these job application, places, or companies, right, on their job application systems and platforms, right, for intaking those. And I think it would be interesting, right, if there was an opt-out feature for submitters, right, who use Dapper. Like, I want to opt out of my submission being screened by Ash AI, right? I think they should have that choice in there. I don't know if that's a thing, but that just came to my mind because I think, I'm thinking of it almost like how we have job applications, right? Where it says, do you want to have AI screen your application or be part of that, involved in the screening selection process? I think, that is something that crossed my mind. So I don't know if they are going to do something like that at Dapple, or if that's something at all, or maybe I'm just overthinking it, Um, you know, I don't have a lot of knowledge on AI, right? But I am aware of, the ability to opt out of it, right? And how it's like how a lot of our data nowadays, on a lot of the systems we're using, it's hard to completely escape AI, right? It's really hard. Like Microsoft Word, a lot of the platforms we use have like AI training tools now, or they're scraping our data and using it for training AI tools. So again, it's nice that Dapple says no. Your the submission data is not used for AI training. You can opt out also of using Ash AI, to automate things and review things and score things, right? And tagging. You can opt out and still do things manually if you like. So you have that choice. I think that's important to give others a choice, right? So yeah, I just wanted to tack that on and clarify that my additional thoughts there. Because I think, submitters perhaps may not want something, where AI is being used to review things, and screening it, and things like that. They perhaps prefer a human being doing that manually, right? Screening it and stuff like that. I know everyone has a preference there on stuff, and maybe some don't care, but I know a lot do. So I just wanted to mention that. And, obviously, I haven't tried Dapple or anything like that. I haven't used it myself, or, so I'm just sharing thoughts and things that come to my mind here, and just did an overview of what was on their site itself, and just by looking at it thus far. And yeah, so I think it'd be nice, right, if they had a comparison grid also on their site against like Submittable or Subfolio or, Duosuma, right, to really see that. They mentioned that it's cheaper than, 50% of, what's out there, but I think, they should just have, it would be beneficial to have that. Even some other, submission management systems that mention, their features and stuff. I like seeing comparison grids myself. I do pros and cons lists a lot myself. Just it helps me like visualize things like differences and comparison charts, right? But anyways, that's just me. So sorry guys. I know this was a super long episode, but submission management systems are def important. So I just wanted to share this one. And again, I'm sure, some founding editors of lit magazine journals or others looking to start one may certainly fall in love with Dapple too. I'm not saying, I'm not saying it's not good or anything like that at all. I'm just saying, it's an option, so check it out for sure, and see if it's for you or not, That's it. So, bye guys, and check out the other ones too. Check out Subfolio, yeah, and yeah, and Duosuma as well. Submittable, I know a lot of places are on it. Some are absolutely, I know in the community are pretty happy with it, and some, quite a lot, aren't, so it's a mixed bag, I'd say. So it's hard, everyone has like things they like about Submittable and absolutely don't like. And I think that's with every submission management system. We have things we like about the submission systems we're on and don't really like. And, for some submission management systems just launching and starting off, I think there is, they totally, right, listen to feedback, and, in terms of like getting to a point where, others feel comfortable on it and are really happy with it, right? Feature requests, things like that happen oftentimes in the early stages, right, of development and refining it further. This is Dapple's in the beta program, right? So they're getting users onboarded, trying it out, giving feedback to them. I'm sure they will find things over time. Same thing with Subfolio, right? Same thing. So yeah, um, again, Sofolio doesn't have any like AI tools or anything like that, and I personally wouldn't use them, myself. That's just me. But I know some like to set up forms quickly and things like that, and want to eliminate that manual effort. So that may be something, like Dapple you may be looking for. I don't know if Subfolio or other submission management systems in existence, right? I didn't cover every single one in existence. I don't know if DuoSumma has any AI assistant tools or anything like that, or and Subfolio doesn't have any. So I'm not sure about those. But anyways, I mean, DuoSumma, I'm not sure. So I know Submittable has AI assistant tools. So yeah, I just wanted to cover this because I thought Ash AI was, pretty unique from what I've saw in other submission management systems, and they have, a different look, and feel, it looks like, to their submission management system. So it's someone definitely to watch and to check out again in your spare time if you're interested. And that's it, guys. Yeah.